Only temporary worker hired full-time during an unemployment rate of 8%. Worked 16 years for Shell, responsible for personal safety, emergency response, fire protection, and security. Worked 14 years for the Burnaby Fire Department as a professional firefighter. 25 years of consulting in oil and gas for Tier 1 companies. 14 years concurrent with BFD. What does BFD stand for?
Fire Department.
Oh, maybe Fire Department. I should have done that. And father of 7 children and 9 grandchildren. Please give a warm welcome. You guys are totally like, yeah. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Sean Livingstone.
Hi guys.
Hi, John.
Hey, thanks for having me. You know, when you're growing up, your parents tell you what to do. When you get older, your wife does. Fair, right? That's my wife said I'm speaking tonight.
It's funny, people laugh.
The pretend high school part, I graduated in 1976. I was totally illiterate. I could read, but I couldn't write a word. Meaning that I couldn't format a sentence or communicate through writing. I now make a living by writing. The only thing that I knew was that I needed to get a job. So I started to apply at the Shell Canada facility because they were union jobs, and union jobs were always better jobs. So they hired like 30 guys to do what's called a turnaround. So my first job was to go inside a very large oil tank that was 6 feet high in sludge and poisonous gas and slosh it around and move it 150 feet, and we did that for days and days. As far as I know, I was one of the last people to do that because they now consider putting people inside toxic gases and stuff like that. It's not a good idea. But I convinced Shell that they should hire me over the other 30 people that all wanted the job in maintenance. And that's kind of the first part of what life is surrounding ethics. So what I wanted to talk about tonight was some of the misconceptions about work, how work tends to go, and kind of what you can expect in your life if you continue to seek employment and work versus raise children and things. I basically fooled the maintenance foreman into thinking I was different than all the other people because I spoke to him very respectfully and I worked hard and I was aware that I was being watched all the time. And took him about 9 months to catch on that I wasn't, and I ended up spilling a whole pallet load of his paint across his warehouse floor. He was quite upset, and I figured I should be a lab technician because being in the rain and working sucks. So the lab guys were all inside this nice building, so I convinced the supervisor of the lab that I was born to be a lab technician. So that was the worst job I ever had in my life. I refer to it as the period of time where I played crib professionally. Because it took me about 2 hours of an 8-hour day to do the work, and then I had 6 hours to lose my mind wandering around a building. So one of the things about life is sometimes those easy jobs aren't really great jobs because they don't challenge you and you don't accomplish anything. So I decided I shouldn't do that, and I went and started trying to be a firefighter. The problem was my desire to be a firefighter didn't line up with my driving record, which I think I had 3 suspensions on. So I had an Alfa Romeo, an MGB sports car, and a Triumph motorcycle in my driveway because I worked since I was 14. So part of the topic that you heard earlier of Caleb and guys like that, they saved their money and they worked. I had a discussion with my son and a couple of my friends, and they go, no, Mr. Livingstone, it's different in your age. And I go, what's different? You have to work to get the things that you want. You're sitting playing video games thinking you're going to get a sports car. It doesn't work that way, right? So we'll talk about ethics and how you actually end up being relatively successful in your life. So I ended up being responsible for all of the personnel safety, which means all the activity that goes on, people have to do with safety, the fire protection and stuff like that. But that carried me through into the Burnaby Fire Department after they closed the refinery. So I was supposed to be retired 10 years ago, with a pension probably that would be equivalent of about $55,000 a year now. But those pensions have disappeared from the Canadian landscape and they don't exist anymore. So one of the things that they tell you is you need to be prepared to change your career. But what I can tell you is your career tends to get built out of what you do today. And you need to be able to do what you do today well so you learn your lessons. I was responsible for commissioning all the fire protection equipment at a $1 billion refinery. So you got to make sure it works. But what I learned in the lab about the methodology of how to run tests, I was able to then apply 20 years later. So everything that you're doing today actually builds, because one of the things that you guys struggle with is you don't have experience to base your decisions on. All you have is information, but you don't really have a filter on how to do that through. So as you get older, you start to make more and more of your decisions based upon the experience that you've learned in life. Of course, you can't get that until you've lived life, so you have to be able to try to learn largely, hopefully, from what people do well, but on the opposing side, what people don't do well is a very good example. So there I went to Burnaby Fire Department, 14 years as a firefighter. They opened the door because at the time I was a hazardous materials expert, so they thought. And then from there, I started consulting when I was in Burnaby Fire. So the way the shifts work, it allows you to run 2 jobs. So basically, while I was raising all of my children, there wasn't enough money being a fireman. So like most firemen, I ran a second career, and that one was consulting, doing emergency response and oil and gas. That kind of gets us today. One of the things about me is I'm very opinionated. I have an opinion on virtually any subject that you can imagine. And if I don't actually have an opinion, I'll just say I don't know enough about that subject to have it, but those are fairly few in between. But when I say I have an opinion, it means I have rationale for what I believe. So what we were talking about, what Connie was talking about earlier about, it isn't enough to know what you believe, you have to know why you believe it. And I tell people I don't have any opinion in my life that you can't change. You just have to overcome my opinion by your rationale. You have to be able to critically think, and you can't hamstring yourself by the way that you think by ideology about this is the way the world should be, therefore it must be like this. And part of what's happened within our culture is we've decided that what's true is collectively decided. So if enough people say, and I was going to plan to ask this question, how many guys here believe in global warming? You raise your hands. It doesn't matter. There's only one guy that believes in global warming in the whole place.
We're homeschoolers.
A lot of homeschoolers here. So it's not a wrong thing to believe, but you have to know the reason why you believe it. And because other people believe it isn't a reason. So I actually brought this kind of part up. So that is in Germany, but this is Nazis. This is the collection. So one of the things I heard when I was growing up is, well, the German people didn't really buy into Nazism. It was more of a smaller group that took over the country. And I researched it and found there were rallies like this held in Buenos Aires, in the United States, in other countries. The Nazis coordinated the attack on Poland with the Soviet Union. And the reason they did that is they were both socialists. So you'll notice by the name, National Socialist German Workers' Party, Nazis are actually socialists. That's the foundation of Nazism, is socialism. But the point of it is, all those people believed it. They believed it because collectively they thought that was a good idea. In life, a lot of what people believe turns out not to be very accurate. So that's my hero. That's who we want to be, right? So life is hard. In life, you have to work at life. It isn't something that just comes easily. The highest rate of suicide in North America comes from the middle, upper class people. People that don't have anything and challenges. They have no purpose to their life, and they end up in trouble, and it's a disaster of a story. But the point of it being is, you have to know what you know. That guy obviously understood a lot more than the people around him. So the part of what we're talking about today is the work ethic that goes into being successful isn't something that they teach you in school. What they teach you in school is what the book tells them to teach you, and you've been filled full of opinions that you now, as you go out into the world, actually have to begin to apply. Right? If I wait for opportunity to come, I have business people telling me all the time, they're not taking people with college degrees. They're looking for the best character. Because they hire people with college degrees and they come to work and they don't work. They don't have any ability to achieve. So when I left high school, I barely graduated high school. My grade 12 was provided by a draft-dodging dope smoking, which was fairly rare back then, a California guy who required us to watch a movie and give an oral presentation on it. It didn't quite prepare me for a workplace. So when I wrote my first letter as a Shell supervisor, my boss brought it back into me, and he literally said, "You're kidding, right? This is not good enough." And dropped it on my desk, and I spent days rewriting a single letter because I didn't know how to write a letter. Right? It's important today. It's still a major form of communication that we have. Texting doesn't cut it. Okay? So we need to be prepared to run against the current that's in our society. So global warming is a great example. I'm not here to debate which side of it is, but you need to really look at what those arguments are to be able to form that opinion. There's a reason why this country and Western countries are prosperous. And we have two competing ideologies that go against that. So what generates wealth? Why is this country wealthy? Because I could go to Argentina, it's got all the natural resources that this country has. It's got probably a better education system, but they're starving. The country's been in disarray for 50 years. It was the 6th richest country in the world. So you run down the list, you run into Argentina pretty quick in the 40s and 50s. And now it's a third world country that can't feed itself. Right? So you can't say that Canada's rich because it's got lots of field and things. Right? So we have ideology about who owns the money that we make, which is my argument for why we're rich. But it produces two opposing work ethics, because you're really gonna fall somewhere in between the two extremes. So the first one is the historical Western ideology, and I wrote that, is that the fruit of your hands, what you actually achieve, my children belong to me until they're adults. There's now 3 countries left in the world where that's law. That's Canada, the United States, and Australia, I believe. The rest of it has started to remove the ownership, the responsibility for children and transferring it to the state. Because we're based upon, in Canada, we're based upon the Magna Carta. In the United States, they have their constitution. But everything that I earn is mine. It doesn't belong to anybody else. Okay? That was written 3,000 years ago. It said, you'll eat the fruit of your labor, blessings and prosperity will be yours. And the chief aim of man is to enjoy the labor of the fruit of my hands. What I produce in my life, I get to enjoy. But to have my children's children, to be able to watch my children's children grow, and I'm getting that right now with 9 grandkids, I have to live in a country that doesn't steal from me. I have to elect a government that doesn't tax me to death. Because 65% of what I earn now goes to my government. Oh, 40%, 42% is the marginal tax rate. But when I go to buy gasoline, half of that is tax.
Yeah.
Right? We're taxed on every aspect of our lives now. So part of it is, who do you believe? So I run into guys that talk about socialism all the time, and this is what we need to do. And I go, great, that's an awesome idea. Where's that money going to come from? And he goes, well, the government's going to give it. Okay, there's no government money. It's your money. The government's not a legal entity. The government actually borrows, prints money in your name. It's actually indebting you at this very moment. Every time that I speak, the government's taking more of your future away because they don't actually believe what produced the prosperity in this country. Okay? There's lots of opposing ideologies, but basically if you go anywhere in the world, we have put, the Western world has put something like $1 trillion into Africa. So you and I, as part of the Western world, have put $1 trillion into the betterment of people that don't have what we have in our country. They tell us that all of that money exists in the Swiss banks. It's been stolen from the people and transported by the rulers back into Swiss bank accounts. And the reason for that is they have ideology in there that says, if I'm stronger than you, if I belong to a stronger tribe, they call it the strongman syndrome in Africa, I have the right to take what you have. There's nothing wrong with me taking from what is yours. And we all go, what? But that's the reality in Africa. We can put as much money into Africa as we have, but we're actually not going to change it until we actually change the ideology which produces a work ethic. So in USSR, the workers used to say, we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us. That was how the whole economy was on. So I would show up at a factory that would actually pretend to manufacture stuff. And somebody would make a little notation that they made 1,000 tons of steel, and then the next guy up would change it into 1,500, and the next guy would change it to 3,000, and the whole economy was built upon everyone working very, very hard. But what happened? They all remained in poverty because the rich stole it. And eventually, in Russia, they got rid of about 60 million people. That number is disputable. China's 100 through starvation and the part of it is genocide. Okay, and counting. There's 3 million Muslims in jail in China today. They're in re-education camps because they think wrong. So you need to understand where that ideology goes, and it always goes to totalitarianism. But what it means is you work and you don't end up actually gaining from the labor of your hands. So part of what you have to decide is when you work, who are you working for? Okay? Foundation of work. Work willingly at whatever you do as though you were working for the Lord rather than people. I'm responsible for commissioning this fire equipment on this new, and it sounds like it's like when you think of people that have kind of high-end jobs, you think of them as being different because they have high-end jobs. They're all just people, right? They just happen to be in that position. So I don't mean to make it sound like something that it isn't. But they're commissioning a plant that's very large. It's worth $3 or $4 billion. And we have to get all fire protection systems in place because it's a refinery. And it runs for 6 days, catches fire, and burns down. They lose $1 billion of asset. And the company, the owners of the company show up and they want to find out what's wrong. So they start poking everybody. Now they fired every manager that was there because, too much detail, but they got rid of everybody because they didn't do what they wanted. And what the owner said to me was, we're sitting in head office and we believe everything is perfect. It's all ready to go. We're told it. We've got the reports. We've got our audits. All our experts have come back and say, yeah, it's all ready to turn on. It's going to be fine. But I'm sitting with the operations manager at 9 o'clock at night, and he's shaking his head and puts his head on the table and goes, it's all messed up. Everything's wrong. but they needed to start it, so they started it and it burned down. 6 days. $1 billion at the time was the largest loss in Canada. Here's the reason why. Because if I'm working for my employer, I have a duty to my employer to tell them the truth, even if it hurts my career. When I worked for Shell, I would put my hand up because I was responsible for stuff and say, that actually is not going to work. And sometimes I wouldn't get a pay raise that year. It's the truth. But that's how you have to decide how you're going to work. Part of what builds wealth is having an employer that will listen to you when you say, hey, I don't think that's a good idea. But what they're actually doing by collectively deciding what's true is they're actually driving people away from thinking critically. So we have a society that says, hey, that sounds like a good idea, but nobody thinks past what they're actually writing in the newspaper. What would be another aspect? How hard do you work when nobody's looking? I played crib every day. It got so bad. Something about human character is the less you do, the less you want to do. So one of the guys I work with, there's an ocean-going tanker waiting for lubricating oil, and the foreman's up with his lube oil that needs testing. And he walks in, and the ship's waiting, so I don't know what the demurrage is, it's thousands of dollars per hour. And he goes, you haven't tested the oil. And it's like 10 o'clock in the morning, the guy's still reading his newspaper. And he turns to the foreman and goes, tell someone who effing cares. So the modern day ethic around workplace dysfunctionalism is it's the supervisor's fault. Because there's no bad employees. This is literally true. There's no such thing as a bad employee. There's only bad environment. And the environment is the responsibility of the team leader, because we don't have supervisors anymore, and therefore the team leader is not fit to be a team leader, and they keep the bad employee and they fire the team leader. Happens all the time. But the ethic, as if we're working for the Lord, or you're working for the best that you can do. The 90-10 split is I get to keep 90. Right? 10% if you're a Christian goes to God, but I get to keep 90 and my government's now stealing 65% of what I make. Not a good situation. And by the way, the War of Independence, United States, was from a 2% tax. That's what caused them to rebel against Britain. Right? And we're way up. But the point of that being is that man had no business not working for his employer well because somebody wasn't watching. And the reason that wealth is generated by companies in Canada is because we have a work ethic that's greater than the work ethic in other countries. And that work ethic is under attack. In Africa, the traditional thing in Africa is women do the work. Men go, yeah, it's not my job. And I go to my kids, I go, Bible tells me that men are stronger than women. That means I can do anything physically that a woman does. So I can change diapers, I can vacuum floors, I can do laundry, I can do whatever needs to be done. What? Because poo smells bad, I can't change a diaper because it's not fitting for a man? If that's your idea of a man, you need to change your aspect. Okay? The problem is, we all take way too much time. Unlike the guys that are buying houses here, right? It says a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of hands, and you will have scarcity like a thief unexpectedly comes into your life and wipes you out. My son, who's living like this, I don't know if he's living like that part because he works really hard. He got his license back because he's following my footsteps. He got it taken away, and he goes, $700. They just charged me $700 to get my license back. And I smile, because I know he doesn't have $700 in the bank account. Why? Because a little bit of folding of his hands, he's not spending his money wisely. It might, he doesn't drink Starbucks, but you drink a $3 cup of coffee a day, that's times 30, that's $100 a month. and then you gotta earn it $150 to be able to do that, because that's after tax. And it says, go slay the ant. Here's part of the challenge, I think, is for my kids, like the 3 vehicles that I owned when I was 19, I go, what's wrong with you? If you want it, go and earn it and get it. No one is going to do it for you. You have to do it yourself. You've got to decide whether you're going to put money away. You need to decide what are the things in life that you need, whether it's education or tools or the first guy that married my first daughter, because we tried to pick them very carefully, he came with a house. Right? And then I tend to work a lot, so when the Shell refinery closed down, a guy came in and he goes, you're losing your job. And I go, yeah, it sucks. And he goes, aren't you worried? Because I had 5 kids at home, or I was pregnant with twins and had 3 or something. And I go, tell you what, I'll work for you 60 hours a week, and you pay me for 37, because that's what salary is based on. And I'm a salary employee for Shell, and I work my whole life at 60 hours a week. And he pauses, and he doesn't get it, right? He goes, oh, because I already knew I was going to be okay. Because when I joined the union, they told me as long as I had a union card, I was going to be fine. I'd always have a job. I'd never have to worry. The bastards in the company would never get me. And then I moved into supervisory at Shell, and Shell goes, hey, you're a supervisor now. You're one of the elite. You're always going to be okay. Shell will always look after you. Here's the news. They lie. They only tell you their intention. It doesn't mean they're bad people, but their intentions don't hold true in economic hardship. Right? So you know what looks after you? Your work ethic and your competency. So you have to continue to learn and keep pushing forward in all the areas that you're trying to do. If any one of these guys stop around sound or lighting or take a year sabbatical, this whole thing will change. Try to be a computer expert. It evolves every 3 days, it appears. I can't keep up. Okay? So the part that I wanted to put up was, this is not a new idea. This is written 3,000 years ago. These are principles that have been applied over generation and generation and generation and generation. It's not new news. It's only new news because we're so used to going, well, I don't get a job, I'll get welfare. But actually, welfare means you have to take my money because you choose not to work. When I was working in the lab, one of the guys got fired. He lied about his grade 12. He never had it, and the company came to him and said, hey, you need to go get your grade 12, you lied. Most companies would just fire him. And he said, I'm not getting my grade 12, you can't make me do that. So they actually ended up leaving the company. He skied 70 times that year at Whistler. 70 days. Well, I sat and worked. But I paid him to ski. He just laughed and said, no, that's my workers' unemployment insurance. I go, no, it's my money, because I pay that every time they take it out of my paycheck. Remember, the government doesn't have any money. They only have your money. Okay? Here's the bad news. These are revolving. You can go to this. This is called the screwedgeneration.ca. Okay, British Columbia debt per share is $13,727. We combine that with the $18,000 that the government has borrowed in your name. So every time you hear a politician open his mouth, like Trudeau just said he's going to give hundreds of $millions for abortion around the world. Wherever you sit on that scale doesn't really matter. The point is, he just committed to spend your money because he doesn't have it. And you don't have it either, so that's now your debt. It's in your name because you have a social security card and capitals letters with a number, and that's what he borrows against. He borrows against your future. I'm old, so it's probably not my future, but it's increasing by $87 million a day.
What?
Just the federal debt. And Trudeau says, don't worry, I'll balance the budget by 2050. Because he doesn't actually care about us. He cares about his ideology, and he cares about being seen as being the image that he's made, but he's actually bankrupting us. He's actually preventing us from, when we go to the hospital, having services and those kinds of things. Okay? So let's, socialism, because we're talking about work ethic, right? I'm going to pretend to work for a guy that says we're all going to get the same amount. We all get the same vacation. We all get the same apartment. We all get the same cars. So that's actually Germany. Germany built a mile-long resort on an ocean, and if you work on your card, you got a little check box for your VW Beetle, and you got a check box that you were, if you were thought right and did the right things for the party, you got to go to vacation, right? So one of the lies is that we should get the money from the rich people. So let's take everything, everyone that has saved in their entire life. So if you have $1 million home in the United States and you own it free, we're going to take it from you. If we were able to go through 340 million people and take all of their money, if they had an asset of over $1 million, which, sorry, isn't a lot of money anymore. I don't have $1 million, but it's fine. How long do you think the government of the United States could run?
I don't know.
Any guesses? 10 years?
20 minutes.
That's good thinking, but it's 113 days. Because there's a lot of wealthy people, wealthiest nation in the world, right? But you can't solve it by taking things that don't belong to you. You have to quit spending money. They can't run the government by taking all the so-called 10% of the money. It won't pay for anything. There's not enough money because they're spending so much money. And we're worse, by the way. That was the only statistic I could find. So this is my last piece of advice. It became very personal in my life. My two kids go to get a job. The local store was the Mark Works Railroad, so my daughter's going out. And she goes, I'm going to go apply and have an interview. And I go, great. Do you know how much you want to be paid? And she goes, Dad, I don't have a choice about that. And I go, well, what days do you want to work? And she goes, well, they're going to tell me what days I'm going to work. And I go, are you going to work through Christmas? And she goes, I won't have a choice. And I go, you have a choice on all three of those things. And she goes, why? And I go, because you can look people in the eye, you're dressed properly, and this was 15 years ago, you don't have any hardware in your face, your hair's not dyed, and that's your competition. So you're going to show up and he's going to do anything that he can to get you to work for him. And she goes, oh, you're just being silly. And then she came back and there was a line of people for interviews, and she came back and she said, Dad, it was so sad. They just weren't, the people, they weren't even able to look up when they were spoken to. So she didn't work Christmas, and she got more money than she thought she would. And that's life, guys. I work in a very competitive industry. There are people that do what I do all over the world, and I don't even advertise for my business because I work at it all the time. I know guys that don't have any work, and I have more work than I can do. I always have more work. I tell them I have two son-in-laws, Jordan and Luke, and Jordan's like the best trades guy around carpentry I've seen, and Luke's done flooring, and he does it like at light speed. And I go, 5 minutes, and I know that they're going to be the last guys employed. So for the guys, future dads here, for your daughters, you need to find somebody that works harder than you do. Okay, it's a criteria. And the reason for that is so you never get your daughters back. Right? But I'm not, you see what I did there, right? I'm not getting, I got 4 son-in-laws that just, they're work machines. They got great work ethic. They're the best in the areas that they work at. And my daughters aren't coming home. I love my daughters, but they should be with their husbands. Here's the point. If you're looking for affirmation in the way that you look or talk, then you're looking in the wrong spot, because man is always going to judge you on the outside. You're taller than everybody in the room, right? Maybe. He's going to get paid more. Sorry, it's facts. People tend to equate height with intelligence. So taller people get paid more. I've seen it in business. They even got a thing about tall presidents, right? All the good presidents are tall, and all the bad ones, all the short guys are Idi Amins of the world, if you know who that is. But the point of it is, their man is always going to look. My son goes, "What are you doing?" And I go, "Well, I'm pressing the shirt, I'm pressing my pants, I'm getting my hair cut, and I'm shaving because I have to go have an hour meeting with a client." And I go, "That client's I've been working that contract with an oil company since 1993, and he's never seen me unshaven or unpressed or without my hair done. Everything is always aligned because that's the first thing that he looks at every time he sees me." So if you want to express yourself and you're trying to get employed, you need to understand, you need to look like what that person is expecting for that work that you're doing. So if I show up like I show up at an oil and gas facility at an artistic, I want a job at an art shop displaying paintings, they're probably not going to hire me. But so you need to appreciate, the last piece of advice I have, not only simply about how you work, and remember that you're in competition for those jobs. So you have to be able to outwork those people that are there. But your appearance and how you talk. I heard a comment really surprised me in the States is that they were interviewing some guys that were coming out of the ghetto, and a guy had gone and he was speaking clearly, and one of the guys that he grew up with looked at him and said, "Yeah, that's just wrong. You're talking, I think he said white or something like that, but he says, you're not talking like your race, you've abandoned, but the perspective is, you have to be able to do what you need to be able to get the job, and if you can't use language properly, then you're not going to be able to achieve what you want to be able to achieve." So much like the story where you heard, I think I started mowing lawns for $1.50. I labored for $11. I ended up as a salaried position, and people have to pay me what the market bears. I'm the only guy in the room. The gas prices go up. I cheer. You can ask my wife. I laugh and I go, "Look at the price. It's $1.68." Right? Because I work for companies that make money off the price of oil. So, but I never expect them to look at me and ask how much I'm charging them, because they have to pay what the market bears. And if the market is X, then they need to pay X. And that's just how the world works. Any questions?
Good.
The website.
Which web?
Oh, the Screwed Generation.
Generation Screwed.
Generation Screwed. It's really sobering. I show it to my kids and I go, you know, it's not good. And I don't know how we deal with it. Historically, there's two ways to deal with debt. You either increase your economic output. So in the States currently, if you travel in the States, you're going to see employment rates that are, well, I was just in the States traveling, and the people down there said anybody that wants a job could have one. So there's cranes, roads, everything. There's so much work going on in the States right now. We've got the strongest economy in the world, and our economy is not. So the challenge is we can't get rid of our debt unless we increase our economic output. And the other way to do it is inflation. So they just steal our money. When I was a kid, literally 25 cents could buy you 2 chocolate bars at the store. So yeah, we make a lot more than $4 an hour now, but the amount that the value of our dollar has been eroded by our government by borrowing the money, because the government has to take that debt to the marketplace. And if they think that the marketplace is no good, then our interest rates have to go higher and higher and higher to compete with the American output. I don't know if you follow that logic, but inflation's bad. But it's the way they get rid of the debt. So at some point, it's quite possible they could inflate it. And when they inflate it, it'll be things like your mortgage can go from $3,000 a month or $1,500 a month and double. Happened in '82, for instance. Some guys that had mortgages, the interest rates went to 15% on the house, and people lost their homes.
Mm-hmm.
That's not very long ago. So we need to be cognitive of what's going on in the world, but there's lots of tradespeople today that don't have jobs. I'm talking to Luke and Jordan, and they go, yeah, we got lots of work. But they know lots of guys that don't, because the guy with the highest skill set is the last guy unemployed. So you guys need to think about that stuff and what you do, and you particularly want to be that guy, because a lot of the information that we have in the world today is not true. Okay, thanks for having me. It's my